This fantastic piece of artwork was made by Nin2DS. You can find them here on this website. They're an incredible artist. I would recommend you check them out. Thank you for making this. I really appreciate it. So, there was like a one frame joke in my last video where I mentioned how I was including a bunch of clips from Serial Experiments Lain in that video, but I hadn't actually watched Lain or finished it. Well, I am proud to announce that I have fulfilled my promise and I have finished Lain. And it was definitely worth the hype, I'd say. So this video is going to be more just like a casual video where I'm going to yap about it. I'm going to talk about it because the goal is to make videos that I can produce more quickly, even if they're a bit lower effort, but I still have things I want to mention, I want to talk about that I don't think deserve months long. They're not months long, but they don't deserve as much setup for their creation, and so I can get them out quicker. And this is going to be one of them. This is going to be my first kind of attempt at doing something like that. I think one of the things I immediately noticed about Lain was the visuals. You know, everybody always talks about, oh, it's the 90s anime. 90s anime is so, why have we not, how did it look this good in the 90s and it sucks now? Which is not true. Not true at all. But, you know, like fucking shit that Vincent Chansart's doing, like with One Piece. It's weird because One Piece went from like, One Piece is a very weird, another tangent, One Piece is a very weird anime because it went from the pre-time skip stuff, which was like, it maybe wasn't the best, maybe had some like issues due to how old it was, but it generally had like, it's like season 1 through 3 of SpongeBob. It had like the best vibe about it that you could get out of a show like that. It was really, just had the aesthetic down perfectly, and it was really funny. That's where all like the best bits from the anime come from, is from that section of the story. Then you get to the post-time skip, which is honestly kind of mid. Like, I think that's where it becomes very aesthetically boring. Like, it just doesn't have that charm to it. And that's also where the pacing, I think, gets a lot worse, to where like the infamous shitty pacing of One Piece starts to pick up, especially because that's like, not only does it get worse on its own, but also it's when like Dressrosa starts. And then you hit Wano and it's fucking beautiful. I don't know if they really fixed the pacing, but they basically just let these animators go in on specific scenes. Like, hey, you're gonna get to make this fight look fucking beautiful. And then we're not gonna give too much of a shit about everything in between. That's how I've seen it. I haven't watched it in a while. But Lain is really good. Lain is really aesthetically pleasing. One thing that I noticed a lot about it is that it has a lot of really harsh lighting. So there are very few scenes in Lain that I noticed where the lighting looks particularly pleasant. It always has this kind of uncanny feel to it. The best example I can give is, well, obviously, you know, her computer room is very dark with all the computers in there and all that. But whenever like one of the very first scenes of the show, when she starts out like on her walk from her home to school, it is stark fucking white. It is just blindingly bright. It feels like when you wake up on a day that you are just absolutely miserable and you don't want to go to work or class or whatever, and you wake up and you just get hit with this blindingly bright light from the sun, as opposed to from the giant light bulb in the sky. And then on top of that, they have like these really dark kind of spooky shadows. Everything that's in shadow is like pitch black shadow with the weird, I think it was like red or green like dots in it. And then there are obviously a lot of the scenes at night where everything's kind of dark, and that's more of like the city, kind of the aesthetic of the city at night, but it still gives that sort of contrast with it. The one times when when the lighting is actually pleasant, I find, are with her friends. You know, when they're not at Siberia, when they're not out in the city, when they're just like at school, or specifically in the very final scene when, that's why I forgot to mention, spoilers ahead. In the very final scene when she's talking to when Arisu, or Alice as I've heard it, I don't know which one it is. It might be Alice. When Alice shows up at her house after all the shit has occurred, and she's like laying in the pile of wires and stuff. That has like that beautiful ray of natural light coming in through her window is just like, that's what I'm talking about. They use the light to sort of show kind of the state of everything. It almost gives you the impression that Lain is, at the very start, in general, uncomfortable with the world around her. You know, I mentioned the example of waking up and just absolutely not wanting to have to go to school or have to go to work, and being hit with the blinding sun as an example of that, going from sort of the comfortable darkness of your room to the blindingly bright outside world that you're forced to sort of partake in and socialize in. And that sort of goes into my expectations going into the series, where I thought that, you know, the whole, from the episodes I would watch at first, the idea of like, you know, Lain, this Chisa, the girl, kills herself and then sends Lain the email. And then I was thinking that, I thought Lain was going to end up being more of like a cog in all of this, just another victim of whatever entity or force is trapping everybody in the Wired. But I was wrong. That is the opposite of what happens. Lain is actually much more significant than I would have thought. And that's like, it still works though, because initially I would have thought that, Lain's so vulnerable to this kind of entrapment because she's a more isolated, more socially awkward teenager. But no, she's like that because she's not a real person. And all of her family are fake. And her sister gets lobotomized halfway through the show. Not even halfway. I think it's earlier than that. Which that part's kind of weird. It makes me think that maybe her sister just like, definitely, I don't think her sister was in on the whole conspiracy around what was happening with her and how she wasn't real. So I guess the thought is that she was but she was still part of the scheme because Lain needed a sister. And then she begins to sort of hone in on what's actually happening to Lain. And then through some way, she either gets too close to the sun and she just gets lobotomized as a byproduct of getting too close to all of that, or whatever forces are beyond just like takes her out. They take her out of the picture. And also, finding out that Lain was not real made her dad just not giving a shit in the most hilarious way possible. Like, it was funny to think that he was just, that all of this was normal. She was his actual daughter. She was his actual daughter, and he just didn't care. That was really funny. But it was kind of weird to have that be the reveal. To have that be the reveal is just really like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Going back to more of the aesthetic stuff, I like a lot of the animation is this. This is better. Lane's better most of the time, more for its sort of vibe than its actual animation. The animation is still good, but there aren't that many like epic epic One Piece Sakuga moments, because I don't think it needs them as much. It has really well animated moments, but they aren't like all the time. But it really does just hone in on the aesthetic. I like the way that all of the tech is designed. You know, it's this very, I don't know the name for the aesthetic, but it's not very sleek. It's very like lots of wires, lots of tubes and such. Also, it was more sci-fi than I thought it was going to be. Because, you know, The Wired isn't our internet. It's like a parallel version of our internet. Also, at the very end, when Taro pulls out his phone, his smartphone, and it has the fucking gun handle, that shit was like really funny. Taro's the GOAT. I like him. He's cool. He's cool. I like it that, you know, I think it was episode 9. I think it was episode 9 where Lain basically had like her last, it was episode 9. I think it was episode 9 where Lain had her last like real moment before she kind of just fell all in on the Wired stuff, before Masami Eri started showing up and doing all this stuff, and that was where we got the explanation of what the Wired actually is and what's going on. It's all intercut with her having her first and last real quote unquote date with a boy, and I like that. I like that. she gets to experience these last couple moments of normality, which is what she really wanted. The whole show being about people connecting and how, in a weird sort of like double-edged sword kind of way, where this big like collective unconscious, because that's another thing I talked about in the Deltarune video about the whole idea of the internet as a collective unconscious, which is what Chris Gabriel, Meme Analysis, talks about a lot, that I think is really interesting. And that's sort of what Lain leans in on. But Lain also takes it to be... Lain does a lot of hammering in that the two worlds are basically one and the same. That the internet and the real world are kind of one and the same in a way through this unconscious thing. Because that's all that the internet is. It's just people... we talk about people online being isolated and not wanting to... People who are really introverted and really online not wanting to be around people and not liking them. But all the internet is kind of just people. Granted, it's a very... It's a often distorted view of people, but it's made of people. It's made of people. It's made by people. It's made for people. It's just it basically is the raw connection without the physical element. It's interesting the expectations I had of Lain that inevitably got kind of thrown on their head, like it being more about the separation between the two worlds, and her being way more important than I thought she was. One thing I really like that they do is they have this sort of fake out with the fake Lain, because you think that it's like a split personality thing, because she seems to be way more confident in the Wired as opposed to in the real world, but she's way more shy. And then there's also that weird scene where the two men in black, which I like them, they're really cool. They bring her to that guy's house, it's like their boss's weird apartment, and she almost seems to switch personalities mid conversation. I guess that's not what happens, but it looks like it is. And so it's like, she's got like a dual personality thing. One of them's the more confident Lain, the other one's the more reserved Lain that's in the real world. Which, for one, I think that's more interesting if they're not split personalities, because that just shows the duality I think that makes Lain as a character more interesting. But also, that's not what happens because of, I think it's episode 8, where we get the real other Lain. It's weird that when the other Lain leaks that Alice was like having fantasies about her teacher, and then I think we see later on the story, is it not implied that she did get with that teacher? I could be looking into it. I could be missing something, but I feel like that's sort of the implication, where she's like, "Oh, I had it when I was a student teacher." Which, I mean, if they're adults, then I guess they're adults, but like, that's just funny. I like the ending a lot. It's both, I would say it's bittersweet, but Lain seems like pretty, I don't know, at least in that ending scene with Alice, she just seems very, very, like, content. I think that's good. I think that's, it's one of the things I wanted to mention. I should have maybe saved this for the end, is that I think Lain might be Jesus. I think Lain might be a Christ allegory, because you think about it in this way. Lain is born both man, both human, and this other entity, and she is in a way a messenger of God. At first they think she's a messenger of Masami, but he ends up not being the real God. He's an acting God, as she calls him, which he was another unexpected addition. I didn't think there'd be too much, I didn't think there'd be like a real, like, a villain with that directive of a villain in the story. I thought there'd be, more implicit, mysterious, esoteric stuff, but I like him a lot. His defeat is kind of weird, though, at the end there. I don't really know what happened. I guess Lain maybe, because Lain just is God at this point. I guess she might have just, told him, fucked him off. She might have just killed him. But, Lain is born of both the unconscious world, the spiritual, metaphysical, digital world, and of the human world. She has a body. She has both of them. and she is made with the intention of uniting the two worlds together, of saving the human race in such a way, and she does. But she at first fulfills her purpose as this entity that unites the wired and the real world, and then she reverses all of that and saves the people of the world by allowing them to live their normal lives. And she is not allowed to live with them. And it's weird because she is very upset by this because she loves humanity. That's what the one thing is that she loves people. She loves, deep down, she does love the people of Earth. She loves connecting with them, as seen with her friends being the one thing that brings her the most joy, the people that she's close with, the people that she actually forms a relationship with. And she cannot live with them. She comes down to Earth. She is, in a weird way, sacrificed, maybe. Kind of. She's like sacrificed for the salvation of a mankind that she loves, but she cannot be with. But she's able to find contentment as this sort of weird, detached God watching from above as all the people she loves go on to live happy lives. And I think that's interesting. I like that a lot. And last thing to mention is that In Pornography is a weird episode. I like when the show uses mixed media stuff, which I don't actually think it uses that much in that episode. But that episode was weird because I started watching it and I was like, is this going to be some weird like AMV recap? And then I got like skipped halfway through and it's like, oh no, this actually has the plot. This actually has the rest of the plot in it. So I'm going to keep watching. Lain isn't like a super plot heavy show, I feel. Maybe that's just my Zoomer attention span being so cooked. But it feels a lot slower than other shows. But, like I said, it gets the vibe down, so it's very good. And I think overall, the earlier episodes didn't really blow. I think that's sort of the issue. The earlier episodes didn't really blow my mind all that much. I thought they were cool, but they didn't really blow my mind. And so at first I was like, part of me doesn't view the whole experience as being like this insane revolutionary thing. But getting into the last couple episodes, this is why people really like this. This is why people really. This is why this show sticks with so many people, because it's interesting and it hits on an emotional level. I need to play the PS1 game because I kept seeing that GIF. The other reason I thought that she was just going to be another cog in the machine is because I kept seeing that GIF of her shooting herself in the mouth with the gun, as opposed to with. No, you can shoot yourself with other things. I kept seeing that GIF of her shooting herself in the mouth, and that's apparently from the PS1 game. I want to play that because you can find that game online. You can find that as just like a browser. It's just a browser game, and it's funny because when I was looking at the Reddit post for it, someone said it was like a frequently asked questions thing, and one of them was, the game is really confusing and awkward to handle. And it said that means it's working. That means it's working as intended. Another thing that I want to mention is that a lot of the time when I'm reading manga, if I go and watch the same scene in the anime, especially if it's something that's darker or more serious with a more serious tone to it, and there's less of an intense scene, I typically don't picture or imagine music when I'm reading it, and I get sort of caught off guard when there's music playing in the background because I sort of set the scene in my head to exist without music, because obviously when you're reading something, there's no music unless you play music, like when I was reading Berserk and I played Bad to the Bone whenever Skull Knight would show up. But Lain, I feel like, captures that pretty well, because there's a lot of scenes in that don't have music, or if they do, it's like a very low-key kind of music that doesn't really take the focus away that much. So I think that these are scenes that I like. I like it when scenes don't have to have music in them, like when they don't feel the need to include music, because I think it's something that should be done more. Having these kind of scenes. I'm trying to think of a way to end this video off, of a way to end this discussion off, but I can't think of anything. I guess what I'll say is, I might have already said this, but I can see why Lain sticks with so many people. Not just because it's a very, internet-based anime that has a lot of those aesthetics of like the anime girls and such that people who were on the internet in the early 2000s really liked. and that has stuck around as an aesthetic even to this day. But because it's just good. It's good. It has that core to it that I really understand. It's a good show, and I would definitely recommend watching it and not just making the character your profile picture to get points online. I'm not saying you're doing that, but if you are, it doesn't really matter, because if you just like the picture and you want to make that your picture, then go ahead. But if you do it because you want to sound smart or niche online, you should not do that. That's lame. That's lame. And that's not Lain. I'm Lain. I'm the real Lain. As I said before, I want to try to make these to up some production on the channel, so I want to try to find a way to make videos that I can get out quicker. I still want to make the more well-edited, longer video essays, so that's going to be, those aren't going away, but hopefully I can throw these in there as well to help get out some thoughts and ideas that don't necessarily require an entire fully made Hopefully, I want to get out some ideas that don't necessarily require a fully produced video essay. I guess they're video essays. And also just so I can help the channel grow. Thank you all for watching. This is like the longest video I made so far. I'll have to edit the fuck out of this. Fuck!